We've been in this series called What Would Jesus Do, where we've been looking at practical ways that we believe that Jesus showed us how to live, and what can we learn from Jesus, the life of Jesus, the words of Jesus, the actions, the patterns of Jesus. What can we learn from him to apply to our own lives? In fact, I believe as followers of Christ, one of the things we're called to do is we're called to be disciples, which means we're called to follow, to be his apprentice, to be close to, in proximity to him, and then we're supposed to imitate, to emulate. And so when we see Jesus do things, one of the things we're called to do is to do those to the best of our ability, to follow him. So this series, we've been just talking about that. What are different things that we see that Jesus has done in his word that we can follow and do as well, and things that I believe that helps us out in a lot of practical ways. And so today, the topic that I'm going to be sharing is probably the one that hits me the most personally, because it's the one I probably stink the most at. And so oftentimes the message that means the most as to a preacher, to a pastor, is the one that you struggle the most with. It's the one that hits you between the crosshairs. It's the one that you challenge. In fact, I even told my wife, it's like, I might not should preach this one this week because I've struggled with this week. And I thought maybe I should push it off. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to tell a few stories. I'm just going to be vulnerable and tell you and share with you how I'm processing this. And I think sometimes we can learn from other people's successes, and sometimes we can learn from other people's failures. And maybe you don't know this, but I'm going to let you know this today. Your pastor is not perfect, and he makes plenty of failures. And so today I'm going to share with you some things that I've personally struggled with. And here's what we're going to be talking about. Here's what we're going to be sharing about. And I stink at this, and I can tell you about it, but I can also show you, because I think showing you makes a point right here. Here's what I stink at. This is it. You ready? It's so hard, I want to talk. Isn't silence awkward? Does anyone else feel awkward, or is it just me? It's probably just me. Y'all are all like, this is kind of funny. He looks like a fool. No, like, one of the things I struggle with the most is pausing. Silence. The awkwardness of the space between things. And last Thanksgiving, I really kind of came face to face with this. My son, Jaden, had won some football awards, and we had this football banquet thing, and they were going to do it the week of Thanksgiving, but my family already planned to go to Arkansas, so my wife left with all the kids and left me and my oldest son, Jaden, at home, and so 3 kids are gone, my wife is gone, and it's just us 2 for a few days. Our house got eerily quiet. I got anxious in the house because of how quiet it was. When you got 4 kids, and now we're from Arkansas, and there's no basements in Arkansas, but in Kansas there's basements. And so our kids often can't hear us, so our conversations often are pretty loud conversations. So there's a lot of yelling in our house, and then all of a sudden when it goes from that to nothing, there was just like this anxious quietness to our house. It was uncomfortable, and I even woke up one morning and I was a little bit worried, like I thought I missed something. And I walk into the room and there was laundry out, and I thought maybe I missed the rapture, because there's like little piles of clothes all over the place. They all left behind. The clothes hit the ground and they went on, and here I am. I missed something. No, but it was this awkward like tension, because I was so, if you got kids or grandkids, you might know what I'm talking about. There's this awkward tension if you're used to volume and then it's removed. Like being quiet and silent, and there's so much going on in all of our lives all of the time. There's so much expectation, there's so much commitment, so many commitments, so many deadlines, so many things we're trying to accomplish, so many places we have to be, so many people we're supposed to connect with, that I feel like sometimes the oddity in our life is not that we're busy or that it's loud. The oddity in our lives is the silence. Like the oddity, the obscurities, the things in our lives that actually make us feel a little awkward are when there is quietness or when there is stillness. In fact, just at a poll right here in the room, how many of you, when you feel like there's nothing to do, like, or you're sitting at home and you're like, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do, or you have a little bit of dead time, you immediately start thinking, what did I forget? Anyone like that? Like a kid's supposed to be somewhere. There's a ball practice we're missing, or there's a band practice we're missing, or there was a lunch I was supposed to be at, or I've had these anxious feelings when there is pause, when there is space of wondering, what am I missing? Because our lives are always go, 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 go. In fact, how many of you have ever said this? I'll stop when I finish this one last thing. Anyone ever said that? Once I finish this one thing, then I'll stop. Has anyone ever said this? I don't have time to stop right now. Anyone ever said that? I got to keep going. I got to keep pressing through. In fact, those of you who own your own business and stuff like this, my dad owned his own business growing up, and I remember oftentimes me working for him as a teenager, going to my dad like at 10:30 and asking the most important question of the day, which is what? What's for lunch? Someone knows. That's the most important question of the day every day. And I remember like 10:30 in the morning, and I'm starting to think about it, right? I'm a teenager. I'm like 13, 14 years old. Like, this is the most important thing, Dad. Not these cars we got to work on, not the money you got to make, not the employees you have to lead. Lunch. And I remember asking my dad, and he's like, come back to me in a minute. I'm busy right now. And I remember as a kid, like seeing 1 o'clock hit and being like, oh my gosh, I might starve to death. Today's the day. It's going to happen. 2 o'clock hits. Dad, when are we going to go eat lunch? And then he's getting more irritated because I've asked multiple times, and it's 2 o'clock. 3 o'clock hits. Dad, we're not even talking about lunch anymore. Now we're talking about this weird thing called supper that's between dinner and lunch. Or if you're a hobbit, what do you call that? There's like the tensies, all the different meals. What is it? Someone said it. I heard someone say it over here. Anyways, if you're watching with the Rings, they get upset because they're like, we eat like 6 meals a day. But I was like 2 o'clock, and I'm like, Dad, when are we going to stop? He's like, I can't stop right now. I got to finish this. And maybe you've said this. Have you ever said this? If I don't do this, it won't get done. Anyone ever said that? These statements are all statements that we've probably made or thought at some point. In fact, some of us said it this week. But here's the irony, is that some of us say these with a certain amount of like prideful bragging, like as if being busy is a badge of honor. And some of us feel that way, like that because I'm busy, I'm important. Because I'm busy, I got things to do. And if I got things to do, that means I'm making money. If I'm making money, then I'm caring for my family. If I'm caring for my family, then it must be important. So I can't eat lunch. I can't pause. I can't do this. I can't, because this is important. And in fact, I would say most of our society is living on this threshold of what else can I get out of life? How much can I go? How far can I push it? In fact, I've always driven kind of older cars, but I got a newer car. And this newer car that I'm driving now, it tells me like in live time, real time, like how many miles per gallon I'm getting. Has anyone got that on their car? It's a pretty cool little feature. And so I find myself though, like I was driving on the highway the other day, and I wanted to see like what was the optimal like miles per hour versus miles per gallon. And you can kind of do this in like Kansas because it's flat. And so I'm like trying to I'm pushing down the gas and I'm accelerating, and like I'm on Highway 35, speed limit 75. So I'm like, where is the optimal like miles per gallon? And here's what I did. I found it. It was like 76 miles, like right at just 1 mile per hour over the speed limit. And I set my cruise there, and I was like, I'm getting 24.8 miles per gallon. This is awesome. And I sat there and I watched it. Then I tried to speed it up a little bit, and it started going down. I was like, oh, no, got to bring it down. And here's what I was doing. One, I was being cheap. But two, this is what I was doing. I was pushing it to the threshold to see how far can I take this? How far can I go and how fast can I go? And like, what's the point? What's the threshold that I can maintain for the longest point of time to get where I'm trying to go, the fastest I can get there, but also go as long as I can go without having to stop. And I think this is how a lot of us are living our lives. We're like trying to push ourselves to that threshold, like how fast can I go? How many things can I do? How many plates can I spin? How many balls can I juggle? How many appointments can I have? How many commitments can I make? And we push ourselves to this point where we're like, okay, as long as I don't crush this threshold, I can do this for a while. And we push ourselves, we hold ourselves there, and then it's exhausting. We find ourselves sometimes holding these periods of time for periods, weeks, months, maybe even some of us years at a time, holding ourselves to these physical, emotional, spiritual thresholds of just trying to grab as much as we can out of life. And so today what I'm going to talk to you about from the life of Jesus, I'm calling it this, is the art of withdrawal. to withdraw. And the reason I call it the art of is because art is something that very few people participate in, and it's something that very few people are good at. So when you have a piece of art, we admire it because very few people can do it, and very few people have that gift and that skill. And so that's why we stop and look at art. It's unique. And I think when people pause, when people withdraw, when people have boundaries, I think you are a unique, peculiar people because our society does not operate that. In fact, we promote the opposite. If you're at work and you put in your 40, 50 hours a week, but then you wake up and you respond to that email at 6 a.m., those are the kind of things that your boss looks at and decides he wants to give you the promotion over someone else because you have no boundaries. Like our families, our kids, like if you want to be connected, if you want to be socially connected, then you have to be on your phone and texting. You got to be the first one to wake up, the first one in a group chat. You can't be the last one to find something out. God forbid you leave your phone somewhere for an hour and you're disconnected if you're a teenager or a young adult. Like, so we stay connected, snapping, texting, whatever it is that we do, and we got to stay connected. We got to stay connected. We got to stay connected. And the way that we stay in the group, the way that we feel our value and worth is that we know what's going on and we're always there to comment and we're always connected. And so therefore, we're promoting the idea of never having a pause. Because having a pause means I might miss something. Having a pause, having a withdrawal means I may be disconnected from something. In fact, the definition of withdrawal is this. This is just from Webster's Dictionary. It's the action of ceasing to participate. That means you're signed up for something, but then you don't go once or twice. That means you're committed to something, but you say, I might not make it this one time. That means you've always done something, but now I'm going to, this is the action of stopping. The action of pausing. Withdrawing is not the action, there's solitude inside this, there's Sabbath inside this, but the reality is I have a commitment that I'm pausing. I have a responsibility that I'm going to step away from. And what this is, the discipline or the art of withdrawal is really this. It's the discipline of having boundaries. It's saying that I'm going to set up parameters at which I'm going to protect certain things. So why do we need to withdraw? And here we're going to look at the life of Jesus. And Jesus, I believe, is going to show us 4 reasons why we need to withdraw just through his word and through his life. So here's the first reason. Why do we need to withdraw? First and foremost, to commune with God. The first and foremost reason we need to withdraw, to pause, to separate, to stop participating in activity and find ourselves in a moment of pause. We need to do this to commune with God, to have a relationship with God. Luke 5:16 says this, but Jesus, I'll show you a few words in this. It's a really simple scripture. I think there's a lot of depth to it. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. First word I want to show you here, often. Jesus often withdrew. Most of us, our pause, our withdrawing from commitment, society, whatever it may be, happens because it's a response to exhaustion. Most of us pause because we're tired. Most of us pause because we have to. I don't know about you, but I've been to a place before where I've been so busy not doing heavy things, hard things. I didn't go run a marathon. I didn't go lift a bunch of weight. But I was so busy, like mentally, emotionally, spiritually, that I became physically ill. You ever been there? Like you start to feel yourself, I can tell I'm pushing myself to the threshold, so much so, it's not that like I'm running marathons, it's like, but there's so much of me is being pulled out. There's so much going out that I can feel now physically it's starting to affect me. Most of the time, that's when most of us in the room decide to pause. But Jesus paused often. In fact, I would say Jesus even had a rhythm of pausing. We call it the Sabbath, where once a week he would pause, but even more than that, Jesus paused for specific reasons, and that's what we're looking at here today. Not just we're going beyond the Sabbath. I want to look at just being healthy. I want to look at this art of withdrawal. Jesus paused often, and he withdrew to lonely places. This is something that is so countercultural. Like our lives are spent constantly connected in so many facets. We don't have a lot of deep relationships maybe, but we've got a lot of shallow relationships. We have so many connection points, so many places, so many people depending on us, so many people counting on us, so many people that we want to talk to, we got to keep up to date with. I found myself, in fact, I took a Sabbath from social media, a sabbatical from social media at the beginning of the year, and this is why I did it. I took 21 days and I didn't get on there. But the reason I did it is because I found myself, I was consuming but not contributing. I was just doing this. I was just scrolling all the time, looking at what everyone else was connected to, but I was not actually having conversations. There was no actual tangible relational connectivity. There was nothing actually fruitful from me, but there was plenty of stuff being taken from me. And this is why I think some of us, we see this. Jesus withdrew to lonely places. That's scary. It's intimidating. Because our lives are constantly connected, at least peering from some weird voyeur social media lens, watching other people's lives and their posts and their images and their vacations and their trips and their things. We're so connected, but yet we're not really connected. And when we step away, when we withdraw to a lonely place, we remove the noise of the world. We remove all these other connections, all these other beeps and connections, and you've got mail, and this text message, and those little red dots that I hate on my phone. Anyone else hate the little red dots? I can't stand the red dots on my phone. When I see a notification, I have to deal with it. And so this is what Jesus did. He withdrew, got away from all of that. And I think some of us, maybe the reason we struggle with like our walk with God, we struggle reading the Bible, we struggle with prayer, we struggle with worship, is because we never withdraw to lonely places. Every time we open up our Bible, some of us, this is sitting right next to it. And it's so difficult to hear from God because we're constantly being reminded of what we're missing or not really missing. That email is like bugging us, like someone sent us something, they asked for something, and I know, and I'm trying to be committed. I'm like, God, I'm not going to do that. I want to spend time with you. But this is here. The art of withdrawal is that Jesus actually went away from everything. He stepped away from his friends. He stepped away from his ministry. He stepped away from his calling. Why? Because he wanted to be with God. And I think for some of us, man, this may be it. I've got some other points today, but this may be it. Your life may be so noisy, and you're wondering, how can I hear from God? And maybe the greatest key, the greatest thing that you can learn today is that maybe I'll hear from God better if I can remove the noise of everyone else. What are the places, what are the spaces that I can get to so I can pray, so I can hear from God, so I can commune with God, so I can hear from God? And so Jesus, He goes a little further, and this is as Jesus is getting his feet washed by Mary, and she's anointing his head and his feet with oil, Judas comes in, he gets upset, and he says, hey, that's wasted money. We could have given that money to the poor. And this is right before Jesus goes to the crucifixion, and I want to just pick up on this. This is Matthew 26, and this is what Jesus says to Judas and to those that are there. He says this, the poor you will always have with you. There will always be something for you to do. There's always a calling. There's always people who need you. There's always one more email you can send. There's always one more post you can like. There's always one more text message you can send. There's always one more dollar you can make. There's always someone else that you can love. There's always someone else that you can serve. There's always more. This is what Jesus is saying. You're always going to have calling and purpose. There's always going to be people that you can do stuff with, but you only have me here for just a little bit longer. And I think some of us live this way, like there's all this to do, and maybe even like as a pastor, I can be guilty of this, all these ministry things and all these people to care for, and miss the fact that Jesus is here and wants to know us. We could be so busy doing things for God that we miss to do things with God. And I think this is the greatest calling of withdrawing, is that I stop from the work and I go to spend time with God. And I stop from the busyness of all these things and purpose. And a lot of the things that we do are not bad things. Jesus, feeding the poor, ministering, healing people, great things. But he says, I got to pause that to be with God. In fact, that scripture right before that says that he paused and he withdrew to go with God. I have to wonder, I wasn't there, but I have to wonder if some of these times when Jesus paused and he went to be with God, if people came to find him to meet with him. came to bring their illness, their ailment to him. And the disciples were like, yeah, Jesus isn't here. Well, I came and I need this healing. Yeah, he's not here. Where is he? He up on the mountain somewhere praying. When will he be back? We don't know. He doesn't work for us. We work for him, you know. And I have to wonder if maybe some people came to him and ended up leaving disappointed because he stopped the ministry for a moment to go meet with the Father. I have to wonder if there was some disappointment. Maybe some people, crowds gathering and like, would he keep preaching? And Jesus is like, I've got to pause. I've got to rest. I've got to withdraw. I've got to spend time with God. I've got to separate. And these separations, these withdrawals, these moments of solitude, and these moments of rest, they cost something. I think they cost us. Did you ever consider that maybe Jesus, in his withdrawing, actually maybe in some people's opinion, I'm talking about that we're there living today, well, shouldn't he stay and keep praying for people? Shouldn't he stay and preach another message? Yet he withdrew. We see it sometimes he's preaching and a crowd gathers. The Pharisees and Sadducees start to press in. It says Jesus slips out the back. Like there had to be people that day that didn't get to him. I mean, this is how humanity, there had to be people who are trying to get in and yet they're disappointed. And this is what I would want us to see, that our communion with God has to be the first and most important thing in our life. You may have purpose, you may have calling, you may own a business, you may have a spouse, you may have kids, and those things are important, but we have to prioritize our relationship with God above all else. Communion with God has to drive us. And so I'd say this, that Jesus, I believe that he knew the importance of communion with God outweighed the expectations of man. Man is saying, well, Jesus, you should be doing this. And he said, no, first and foremost, I've got to be with my Father. First and foremost, in fact, Jesus even said this, I'm not even going to say anything unless the Father tells me to. I'm not going to do anything unless the Father tells me to do it. How would he know that if he didn't pause to withdraw to hear from the Lord? So Jesus paused, he withdraws, he wants to serve the Lord and follow him. And we live in a world that's so consumed with pleasing and fitting in and achieving and winning that I think sometimes this seems countercultural. How am I going to pause if I have things to do? And it made me think about this. I was at the Chick-fil-A just right over here the other day, and I love Chick-fil-A. It's one of my favorite places to go, and especially that macaroni and cheese, man. That mac and cheese like reminds me of like grandma's mac and cheese at the church potluck, right? I mean, that stuff, it's got that cheesy layer of crusty cheese on top. Oh, it's so good. Anyways, I was at Chick-fil-A, and you know, you've probably seen the memes, but they meet you like way out by the road now. It's like you're 100 feet away from Chick-fil-A, and they're already taking your order. And so this little girl walks up and she's doing the whole like, come on, go with me. And like she's walking and taking the order, you know, like punching in and walking in. So I pull up and she's like, hey, you know, how can I serve you or whatever it is that they say. It'd be my pleasure to serve you. What would you like? And I said, can I have just a minute? And she was like, sure. And how many of you know that when a fast food employee says, sure, take your time, they really don't mean that. There's no way they can mean that because there's 30 cars behind you. Like, especially if you're at Chick-fil-A, there's like the road is like, you're down at Douglas, man, lined up there. And so she's like, sure, take your time. And I'm like, but I still felt the pressure of like, I got to get my order in. People are behind me. And she's like walking beside me, you know, just whenever you're ready, you know. And so my kids are yelling. It's like, and I don't know why it's so hard to order at Chick-fil-A because they only have like 8 things on the menu and we order the same thing every time. But for whatever reason, our family's yelling, you know, from the back, I want lemonade this time instead of tea, you know. And so we're getting all of our order in. And so we get the order in, and then there's this, we get around to the corner. I mean, it feels like 30 seconds later, literally, we're pulling up to the window, and they're like throwing our food in, and the order is right, and it's hot. How did you get all of my food together in 45 seconds? I got 6 people in my family, and the order is perfect, and it's fresh. Like there's some sort of sorcery going on at Chick-fil-A. Some sort of mind reading, predestination, something or another. I don't know, but somehow they get your order. It's always right. I'm like, I want 2 chicken. And my family's weird. We want 4 Chick-fil-A sauce, 2 mayonnaise, 2 sweet and spices, 3 ranch dress. I mean, we give them all and it's right every time. And so we get up there, and at the end, you know, they're throwing it in the window, and they're still like walking your food to your window, and you're walking out. And you get out, and it's right, and you're like, that was good, that was great. That's why we love Chick-fil-A, right? Because we get in the drive-through, they get our order right, the food is fresh, and they're kind to us. And so we get out, and I think some of us, this is how we approach our relationship with God. we go to God and we're like, God, I got a list of things today. And God's like the Chick-fil-A employee. Okay, let me know what you got. It's like, okay, and people are yelling. Okay, my kids need this and I need that. And okay, then yeah, no, exchange this for that. Hold on a second, my phone just buzzed. I'm trying to get my app. I got to load it so I get my points. And then all of a sudden we're at the window and we're hoping that God just throws the order in and gets it right and does what we want him to do, and we go on our way. And this is how fast most of our spiritual lives are, because this is how fast the rest of our life is. Like this literal example of Chick-fil-A, and I love Chick-fil-A. I'm not dogging it. I love it. I think it's amazing. But this literal example of Chick-fil-A is how we do everything in our life. This is why people love it, because it matches the pace of everything else that they do. Like they get it right, they get it fresh. We hope all of our life is like that. And some of us, we think and hope that our spiritual walk is like that. And we struggle with this idea of setting boundaries, of pausing. Because what if I pause, and if I pause, what's that going to cost me? If I stop, if I really do separate and withdraw, and maybe someone can't get a hold of me for a few hours, or maybe I don't reply, what happens? What does that cost me? And I think what happens is we start to think about the disappointments we're going to cause people. Like if I don't do this, I'm going to disappoint someone. Someone's going to be disappointed in me because I've always done this, or they expect me to do this. And here's what happens with disappointments. Is I think you can do disappointments on one side or the other. You can either disappoint people in a controlled setting that's healthy, because you have boundaries and because you like to withdraw and you want to know God and you want to know Jesus, or you're going to disappoint people because you think you're Superman and you just push, and you eventually drop the ball. So disappointments will be the result of a healthy choice or a painful outcome. But the reality is, here's this, just get ready, you're going to disappoint people. So if our idea in not pausing and not resting and not finding solitude and not trusting God, but thinking everything depends on us and I'm going to go, if our idea in that is that I don't want to disappoint, I want to win, I want to achieve, I want to earn, then here's the reality. I want to let you know at some point you're still going to fail people. So here's the challenge, I think, then is to us is to recognize our humanity and recognize our limits and set pauses that are healthy that enable us to go the long run instead of trying to think of what we can achieve in a short run if we don't stop. And I don't think sometimes we calculate the amount of cost the things that's going to cost us if we just keep going. What if we learn to say no to some things? What if we learn to say no to that extra appointment that our boss wanted to book us? Like, hey, I know it's after hours, but could you do this? Or what if we learn to say no to the extra sport practice? I know we got 3 practices, but we got state tournament coming up in 3 weeks, so we got to practice one more time, because this one more time is going to give us the edge. What if you're like, hey, no, we're not going to make it? What if we said no to some of those things? It'd make you odd, wouldn't it? Because no one else, remember, it's the art of withdrawal. Very few people do it. Makes us, it's an extreme, a unique thing. What if we said no to the hangouts or the brunches or the parties because we realized our patterns weren't healthy, we needed to pause? What if we said no to a family gathering? Man, it's great to gather with family, but what if you looked at it and said, hey, based off of this week, I don't think we can make that. We've got these other things that we need to manage. What if you said no to the lake? And I love the lake. In fact, we're going to look at Jesus did some good things on the lake. And so, but what if we recognize hey, there's some things in my life that I need to say no to so I can say yes to things that matter. If we don't learn to say no to the good, then we'll never have time for the sacred. We're going to have to say no to some things as a people. We're not going to be able to be like everyone else and just go, yes. As believers, I believe we're going to have to say no to some things, find pause in some things. We got to make the choice to put God first. Mother Teresa, great quote from her. She says this: we too are called to withdraw at certain intervals into deep silence and aloneness with God. Together as a community as well as personally to be alone with him. So there's an aloneness, or there's a sacredness to withdrawing as a people like we're doing right now. This is a type of withdrawal. We don't do this every day. So we're withdrawing from our work days. We're withdrawing our kids from our school patterns. And we're coming. So there's a withdrawal to this. You're doing it right now. This is part of it. But then she says there's also one personally, one that you do on your own. And she says, not with our books or our thoughts or our memories, but completely stripped away from everything. To dwell lovingly in his presence, silent, empty, expectant, and motionless. We cannot find God in noise or agitation. Man, what if we paused? What if we were a people of pause? Here's a second thought for us today. Why do we need to withdraw? to prepare for the important. You got important things to do. You guys are called. You guys have callings. You have giftings. Some of you, like I said, you own businesses. Like, you got important stuff to do. And I think it's important for us to recognize that withdrawing enables us to do important things. It prepares us to do important things. Luke chapter 4, before Jesus' ministry began, he withdraws. It says, and Jesus, full of the Holy Spirit, returned from the Jordan and was led by the Spirit into the wilderness. For 40 days he withdrew into the wilderness, being tempted by the devil, and he ate nothing during those days. And when they were ended, he was hungry. Some of you are hungry right now. You're like, it's 12:05. I hope he's wrapping this up. Let's go. And so you're hoping to withdraw to the brunch here in a little bit, okay? But Jesus, he withdrew, and this was the launch of his ministry. So before he starts healing, before he gathers his disciples, before he starts preaching, the first thing that Jesus did, he prepared himself to go do important work. And here's the irony is, most of the time, here's how I prepare to work, is I start to work. My preparedness, like if I think, man, I want to have a good day, I want to get some things done, this is what I do. I wake up, I pull out my phone and I check my email, or I send a message on one of our staff communication things. So the way that I prepare to work is by starting to work. Have you ever been guilty of that? You wake up and immediately think, maybe you're a student and you immediately think, I got to do that homework I should have done last night. The way I'm going to start my day is doing the thing I should have done yesterday. I'm only preaching to my kids right now, not any of the rest of you guys, okay? But like sometimes the way that we start our day is by actually starting with the work. And the way we prepare for the work is to start the work. What if before we started to work, we prayed and asked God for wisdom? What if before we started the work, we prayed and thanked God for a day, thank God for another breath, thank God for a job, thank God for the provision, thank God for the house over our head? What if we didn't start our work with work, but we started our work with Jesus? What if we invited him into our conversations? And what if before we put our body and our minds to work, we put our souls to work? Jesus, I want to know you. Jesus, I want to be led by you. Jesus, would you be with me? Would you walk with me? And in Luke chapter 6, 12 through 13, it says that Jesus, he went out these days to pray all night, and he continued in prayer to God. So he withdrew and he prayed all night. And when the day was finished, he called his disciples and chose them from the 12, whom he named apostles. So before Jesus even picked the people he was going to do the work with, he prayed about it. Before he even built his team, he paused and he prayed about it. Early in ministry, before he came out that he was doing all these incredible things, he was preparing for the work by withdrawing and spending time with God. And one of the ways that we do this, we call this the Sabbath. And it's what we do, many of us are doing today. It's our day off where we rest and we reflect and we worship. And I think this idea of the Sabbath, it does two things for us. If you're unsure what the Sabbath is, it's a Jewish thing that started off called the Shabbat that we now still practice, which is a day of separating. But I think the Sabbath, it does two things. It marks the end of a week in celebration of what we've accomplished. So at the end of your week, you're going, man, I need to withdraw. I need to pause. I need to rest and go, look at what God did. God, look at what you did through me. Look what we've accomplished. It's a celebration, and it's a rest from a hard week's work. But it's also, the Sabbath is not just the mark of the end of the week, it's the mark of the beginning of the week. It's the preparation for what we still have yet to do. It's a rest for a hard week's work. One of the things I said before when I preached on the Sabbath is that the Sabbath is working on 6 days, taking a break on one day, and trusting that God could do more with the one than you could do with the 7. And that's what this is. It's a rest. I finished this week. I trust you, God. I'm going to rest in you, God. I'm going to withdraw. I'm going to rest. But then I'm also doing that to prepare for what I'm about to step into. And so I would say this is our third thought, and this kind of rolls right into this, is that the reason we need to withdraw is because we need to recharge physically. Recharge physically. Jesus sends out the 12 disciples to go do ministry. They're excited. Jesus withdrew, he prayed, he starts his ministry. Jesus withdrew, he prays, he gets wisdom, and he picks the 12 disciples. Jesus withdraws, and the disciples go out. So now Jesus withdraws, and now the disciples are going to go do the work. And so he sends them out, they go preach, they go heal, and when they come back, they're excited. They're like, this was incredible, Jesus. You should have seen. I prayed for this demon-possessed girl, and a demon came out of her. I prayed for this guy that was lame, and he was healed. We preached the gospel. People got saved. This was incredible. And here's what Jesus says to them in response when they've come back from doing the work. In Mark chapter 6, Jesus said it says the apostles returned to Jesus and told them all that they had done and all that they had taught. And this is what Jesus says to them. Come away by yourselves to a desolate place, a lonely place. This is what he says, and rest a while. For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. Have you ever worked a whole day, and all of a sudden it's like 3 o'clock, and you're like, I haven't even stopped to eat lunch. Have you ever done that before? Like you just go, and you're like, it's 3 o'clock. I haven't stopped to eat lunch. Like this is what the disciples were going through. It says that they didn't even pause to eat. They were doing important work. They were grinding. They were going. And it says they went away in the boat. Something about a boat just refreshes the soul right here. If anyone's got a boat, let's go right now. This is from the Word of God right here. They went away in a boat to a desolate place by themselves. So Jesus says, not only am I doing this to be led by God, to know God, to be recharged in the Spirit of God, to get wisdom from God, I'm telling you, you need this. So he gives this command to his disciples, go away. You guys separate. Go rest. So here's the conflict with me. If I refuse to withdraw, am I claiming that I'm stronger or smarter than God? Because if Jesus did it, if he commands the disciples to do it, then am I smarter or stronger? I've got to be one of them. I'm either smarter in like what he taught them. I'm like, yeah, I got a better way, Jesus. I know how to keep my foot on the gas and go a little further than the rest of you. I know how to push it to the limit. Or am I stronger? I'm like, Jesus, I know you needed a break, but my body's better conditioned for this. And if you've been to the gym with me, you know that's not true. But are we like literally? So if this is what Jesus did, if this is what the disciples did, why do we think we can do without it? Why do we think we don't need a pause? We don't need a break. We don't need a Sabbath. We can just drive on through and we can keep going and it's going to be okay. If I just take a little bit of time here, I'll be okay and I can just keep going. We keep just our foot on the gas to seeing how far we can go before we have to stop. Psalm 127:2. It's a great verse. If this is you in the room, this is me in the room. So if this is you and you identify with this, it's a great verse for you. It is in vain that you rise up early and go late to rest. So you work a whole day. That's in vain. It's a waste. And this is what he says. If you're eating the bread of an anxious toil. If you work hard all day and you stop to eat in the blessing of what you've just earned, the blessing, and while you're eating, you're still thinking about what else you have left to do, you've wasted it. You did that in vain. If you've ever paused at the end of a day where you worked hard and you've not been able to take some enjoyment out of it, if all you can think about is what you have next, what you're doing is in vain. You're just constantly going, constantly pushing. And this is what he says. For God gives to his beloved sleep, rest, peace. But if you're pushing, you might be missing it. Here's the last thought for us today. In closing, the last thing we need to do is we need to reset emotionally. And this is what happens when we withdraw. We reset emotionally. Luke 12:44, Jesus is about to go to the cross. His disciple Judas just betrayed him. And so Jesus goes to pray. He withdraws to pray. Luke 12:44 says, being in agony, he prayed earnestly. Some of you have felt that before. You've been betrayed. You're exhausted emotionally. You've given. Man, if you're a parent in the room, you know what that feels like. You're just loving your kids and leading your kids and trying to correct your kids and keep them alive and keep them fed. And that can be emotionally exhausting if you're maybe even if you're a student and you're trying to figure out how do I keep up with everything going on and make the grades and meet the expectations of my parents. It could be exhausting. If you own a business, you think, I'm trying to care for all these people and I'm trying to care for my family. And the better I lead this, the better I care for my family. But then all these other people have their problems. I'm trying to help them. It could be exhausting. Like there's so many, it doesn't matter what your context is. The reality is whatever you're in, wherever you're at in the workforce or family world or whatever, you've got people pulling on you and you can find yourselves emotionally exhausted often. Jesus was in this place. He was anxious. He was fearful. He was exhausted emotionally. But he goes and he withdraws to pray for strength. And in fact, the scripture right before this says that an angel came to strengthen him because he needed it. He was in that place just pouring himself out. And this last week on Wednesday, I had just a great day of ministry here at the church. And I'm not trying to brag, but I want to tell you about this day because it was awesome. Woke up that morning and met with a few guys, and we went to the Wichita prayer breakfast where a bunch of leaders all across Wichita meet together and pray. At 6:30 in the morning, we had great breakfast, piles of bacon, Pop-Tarts from Homegrown. It was amazing. God was there. And not just because of the food, because we were praying, but I believe God goes where good food is too. And so it was an amazing morning. We prayed and did that, and I went straight from there, and I had 3 separate one-on-one meetings with some young guys that I was personally discipling for the last year. And each one of those lasted about an hour, hour and a half, where I looked them straight in the eye and said, do you know Jesus? And what questions do you have about Jesus? And I'd been teaching them and spending time with them, and then for an hour and a half personally investing into them and talking to them, praying with them. It was incredible. It's like one of the things I live for is getting to have that opportunity to ask people, do you know him? Can I help you? And what questions do you have? And did that, and I ran straight from that back to the church. So all morning long, meeting with people and one-on-one, praying with people, come back to the church, and there was a pastor's gathering that we were hosting, had a few pastors in here, about 15 or 20 of us met, and we prayed together, a bunch of East Side pastors, but we did it in the lobby, and so I threw some tables up and tried to make it look a little bit nice, and we did it, and we prayed together, and I was like, we got done, and those guys left about 2:30 or 3, and I realized I was supposed to pick up my car from the shop, so I left to go pick up my car, got my car, and then I realized also that I had an evening thing that evening, another prayer thing, and so I was like, man, I got to get back to church. So I come back to church, and I'm like, hey, I got like 10 minutes, 15 minutes here. I'm gonna clean up all these chairs and tables that we set up. So I start picking up the chairs, and sure enough, we got these black chairs. I call them lottery chairs because you never know if you're going to sit in one, if it's going to stand or not. And so it's like a lottery. Every time you sit down, you might win. And if you win, that means you hit the floor. And so we got these cheap black chairs, and I was folding one of them up, and it pinched my finger, and I dropped the chair with a little bit of force. And I just sat there, and I looked at it, put my hands on my hips, and I was frustrated. And I was like, these dadgum chairs. I should have bought nicer chairs. I don't know why I tried to save money with it. Just all these thoughts, go through your head. Why am I trying to save money with these chairs? We should have just spent some money, got some nicer chairs, and whatever, And then all of a sudden, I recognized I was emotionally not well right there in that moment. I was angry about something, and I was frustrated about something I should not have been. So what did I do? I practiced this. I decided, hey, I need to pause. I need to withdraw. I need to step for a second. So I took up that chair that I just threw down. I stacked it, set it back up, and I'm intentionally sitting in a chair that just made me mad, that hurt my feelings, right? I'm like, you're going to be part of this process too, because you got me in this. So I set the chair back up. I sat down in a chair, and I just sat there for like 10 minutes, and I just prayed. God, I want to know you. God, I've been going today, doing important things, doing meaningful things. But putting all that aside, I just want to know you. I'm done doing stuff for you today. God, would you meet with me here in this lobby in this cheap black plastic chair? And I paused, and God met with me there. And I think some of us, maybe in the room, we're so concerned with trying to move forward that we're missing the art of withdrawal. We're thinking, how do I achieve? How do I win? In fact, I would tell you this. If you want to move forward, I think it's a necessity to withdraw. It seems countercultural that if I want to move forward, I need to go backwards. But I'm telling you, if you want to be in this for the long haul, if you want to run the race, if you want to finish the fight, if you want to be looking Jesus in the face someday and him look back at you and say, well done, good and faithful servant, I believe that one of the keys for that is being a people who are willing to pause, to be a people who are willing to withdraw, to be a people who are willing to rest, to be a people who, while the rest of the world is busy and pushy and fighting and trying to achieve, we're a people that rest in the goodness and the faithfulness and the strength and the power of God. We recognize it doesn't matter if I'm busy all day long because he's ultimately in control. I can pause for a moment because I trust him. I can rest in his presence because I believe he's faithful and good. I know it doesn't all depend on me because I serve a God who created it all. I'm not so idolatry driven that I think my work matters more than his presence. So we pause and we meet with him. And I believe this is a scripture for us today. If this is you, I want to just read this over you in closing. Jesus said this. He said, "Come to me, all who labor, all you busy people, all you people who are trying, who are fighting, who are grinding, who are working hard, come to me." I've always read this scripture as for the people who are weak. Like, come to me, all who are labor and heavy laden, who can't handle what you got. Like, you're barely surviving. And I think this is the exact opposite. I think this is for people like me who are prideful and think I have a handle on it. Who are people like me who think I can, if I get my foot on the gas just at the right spot, I can keep going. I think this is for us. Come to me, you who labor, who are heavy laden, who you can carry a load. You're strong. You think you got this. You need to come to me and I'll give you some rest. Take my yoke upon you. A yoke is a burden of work. So Jesus says this, set your work down and pick up my work. Pick up my way. Pick up my direction. And he says this, what would Jesus do? Jesus tells us, learn from me. For I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Jesus says, I've got a way to do things. I've got a yoke. A yoke is a form. It's a form that would go on an oxen that sits on your shoulder so an oxen can pull. He says, I've got one too. Like when you come to me, when you come to be a believer, when you come to follow me, there's still work to do. But the way that I do it is different. The way that I do it, you can run and not grow weary. You can serve and not fall apart. You can keep grinding, but guess what? The yoke is easy. The burden is light. If you would just trust my ways, if you would follow me, and what's the way of Jesus today? What are we learning today? We need to withdraw. Some of us in the room, we need to pause.